Pregnant wife confronts millionaire husband's mistress at their secret getaway. They say a single secret can shatter an entire world. In the elegant hush of an afternoon tea room, Emma Carlyle felt her heart thunder with dread. She was almost 8 months pregnant, her hand trembling over the phone that refused to stop buzzing. Another cryptic text from her husband, Lucas, and something inside her said tonight was the night she would finally discover his darkest secret. Little did she know, the truth would unfold in a luxurious hideaway, hidden behind veils of wealth and influence. But sometimes, money can't shield anyone from the devastating consequences of betrayal or the sweet, inescapable touch of karma. Emma Carlyle had never been the type to eavesdrop on her husband's phone calls. She was the trusting kind, the sort of person who believed her love story was unbreakable. After all, Lucas Carlyle was the man who had swept her off her feet with grand gestures, poetic confessions, and a ring that sparkled like starlight. When they married, she had felt as though she'd been plucked from an ordinary life and placed on a gilded pedestal. She moved from her modest home in Cleveland to Lucas's penthouse in Manhattan. A panoramic view of the city's skyline served as their daily backdrop. But suspicion has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. It began as a small voice in her head that questioned the odd hours Lucas worked, the business trips that seemed to stretch a little longer. Each time, the credit card statements with puzzling expenses from lavish hotels she'd never heard of. Emma brushed off those thoughts, telling herself that it must be part of Lucas's new entrepreneurial venture, a tech startup that had soared in value almost overnight, turning him into a millionaire before he turned 30. Yet, each time Emma tried to reach out to him, there was a sense of distance, a coolness in his responses. He looked at her less, his eyes drifting, as though his mind were miles away. He was absent-minded at dinners, forgetting the smallest details that used to be second nature to him, like how Emma preferred her tea or what color flowers she adored. The more these instances piled up, the more that tiny voice of doubt in her heart amplified into a roar. 7 months into her pregnancy, Emma discovered something she wished she hadn't. Sorting through the day's mail, she came across an unmarked envelope. She almost discarded it, thinking it was yet another flyer or sample addressed to occupant. Curiosity tugged at her, though, and she slid a letter opener delicately through the seal. Inside were 2 hotel receipts from the Four Seasons Resort Maui at Wailea, one of the most luxurious places in Hawaii, well known for catering to the world's elite. The billing address was to Lucas Carlyle. The dates matched the days he claimed to be away on business conferences in San Francisco. Emma's stomach twisted. He had never mentioned flying to Maui. For a moment, she rationalized that perhaps his business had extended that far. But the receipt included spa treatments for 2, expensive dinners for 2, and a private oceanfront cabana. This was no ordinary business trip. Her breath came in shallow spurts as she realized the name on the second occupant line was carefully smudged with pen. Emma recognized it as Lucas's handwriting, awkwardly scribbled, as if he wanted to obscure who had accompanied him. The realization settled in her chest like a heavy stone. Had Lucas been lying to her all this time? The father of her unborn child, the man she thought she knew inside and out, was living a double life. She tried to summon the courage to confront him, but every time she envisioned it, she pictured that calm, controlled expression he wore so well. She knew he'd likely have an excuse, some improbable story that might put her mind at ease for a day or two, until more damning evidence emerged. The heartbreak was already an ache she could barely contain, yet she also felt a searing anger that made her want to hurl those receipts in his face. Emma decided she needed to keep her composure. To gather more information, she thought it would be best to wait for the right moment, to find out who exactly was staying with him in those rooms. But part of her dreaded the entire ordeal. It hurt enough to see the receipts. Could she bear witnessing more? A week later, Lucas insisted she accompany him to a high-profile networking event in Manhattan, an elegant cocktail gala for entrepreneurs and socialites. The shimmering lights of the venue bounced off crystal chandeliers, and the hum of conversation rose like a distant ocean. Emma wore a flowing burgundy gown that draped over her pregnant belly. She felt eyes upon her, some sympathetic, some curious. Lucas moved around the room smoothly, greeting potential investors, exchanging pleasantries with friends, as though the last few months of suspicion and distance had been a figment of Emma's imagination. She tried to be the supportive wife, offering polite smiles and nods, but she couldn't help noticing the quick glances from a few women who seemed to know something she didn't. Their eyes darted from her to Lucas. They whispered behind their manicured hands, occasionally letting out low giggles or disapproving tuts. Eventually, Emma slipped away to a side lounge where a few of the wives had congregated. She recognized Clarissa Walters, an old friend and philanthropic influencer who had once praised Emma for her kindness. Tonight, Clarissa seemed on edge, but also sympathetic. She asked Emma how she was doing and mentioned that pregnancy can be stressful, especially if one's husband was so preoccupied with new relationships and business deals. Emma's heart picked up speed. They were careful with their words, but Emma suspected Clarissa had heard rumors. No one was bold enough to say the mistress's name, but they all knew. Women in these circles usually did. Emma's cheeks burned with humiliation. It was one thing to suspect her husband's betrayal, privately another thing to realize the entire social circle might be gossiping about it. That night, after returning home, Emma decided to piece the puzzle together once and for all. She began rummaging through Lucas's office, scanning his calendar and to-do lists, checking for any slip of truth. She felt a pang of guilt for invading his privacy, but her heartbreak pushed her forward. She discovered that Lucas had a flight reservation to Florida in a few days. She tried to recall if he had told her about any trip. She drew a blank. Her trembling fingers tapped her phone screen, pulling up his digital calendar that they sometimes shared. Nothing about Florida. Instead, an innocuous note in his day planner read, "Meeting with Bergstrom and Company." She decided to call a friend who worked in finance. He confirmed that Bergstrom and Company was definitely based in New York. They had no Florida outposts. Emma's breath caught. If Lucas wasn't traveling for a business meeting, then why was he going to Florida? She felt her baby kick. A wave of maternal protectiveness rushed through her. She had to find out. She told herself that the child in her womb had the right to know if their father was a philanderer. She steeled her resolve and booked a flight on the same day, planning to follow him discreetly. Emma masked her plan by telling Lucas she was visiting her cousin for a weekend baby shower in Pittsburgh. He barely looked up from his phone, distracted and immersed in a conversation with someone on the other end of a text chat. He simply said, "Have a safe trip," and planted a cursory kiss on her forehead. Emma swallowed her heartbreak, wondering what had happened to the man who used to cradle her face in his hands and gaze at her with complete devotion. The next day, Emma sat at the boarding gate of LaGuardia Airport, her nerves frayed. She wore a loose-fitting dress and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face. She kept checking her phone, half expecting Lucas to call and demand where she was, or to announce that the trip was cancelled, but no such call came. Upon landing in Florida, she discreetly followed Lucas at a distance through the busy corridors, staying back just enough so he wouldn't recognize her in the crowd. Outside the airport, Emma rented a small sedan much different from the chauffeured cars. Lucas usually employed and followed from afar, relying on a combination of intuition and vantage points to keep up with him. She was prepared for the heartbreak she might witness, but each mile inched her closer to the truth that could shatter her world permanently. Lucas eventually turned off the main highway onto a secluded lane. Emma recognized the area as one of Florida's top vacation hotspots for the wealthier place of private beaches and exclusive resorts. The watery sunlight gleamed over immaculate lawns lined with palm trees. After a few turns, she saw him pull into a gated driveway. The sign outside read Clearwater Shores Villas, an ultra-luxurious property known to host celebrities and affluent entrepreneurs. Emma parked some distance away, beyond the villa's private entrance. Her heart pounded as she considered her next move. She reminded herself she was no meek, helpless victim. She had endured so much, and she deserved the truth. The baby kicked again, as though reminding her of the life she was fighting for. She slipped past the gates when no one was watching, apparently. Staff here recognized the usual guests and didn't question them much. Trying to remain inconspicuous, she scanned for Lucas's car among the row of immaculate vehicles. Hers stuck out in its ordinariness, so she parked further away from the main lot and walked. Luxury dripped from every corner of the property, from the mosaic-tiled fountains to the sweeping archways. After some searching, Emma spotted Lucas's sleek black SUV parked outside a secluded villa near the beachfront. Soft music and laughter drifted from inside. The curtains were slightly drawn, but the door to the veranda was open, letting in the ocean breeze. Emma felt her chest tighten with dread. She crept closer, careful not to be seen. Peering in through the gap in the curtains, she saw a sight she could never forget. Lucas, sitting on a plush sofa, close to a striking woman with chestnut hair that caught the fading sunlight. Their hands were intertwined. The woman leaned in to whisper something in Lucas's ear, and he smiled an open, affectionate smile. Emma hadn't seen directed at her in months. The world spun around her. Emma watched from the shadows, frozen by heartbreak. She studied the woman who had stolen Lucas's heart. She was elegant in a way that suggested old money, wearing a flowing sundress, simple yet impeccable. She had an easy confidence as she leaned over to place a delicate hand on Lucas's face and kissed him softly. Emma felt her own cheeks burn with tears she refused to release. She overheard snippets of conversation. The woman's name was Sophia Arrington, a name that rang vaguely familiar. Emma thought perhaps she was from one of those well-off families in Palm Beach. Emma listened, her breath shallow, as Sophia teased Lucas about how he was working too hard, how he needed to slow down and enjoy their time together. Lucas's answer made Emma's stomach churn. "I promise. Once everything is set with the baby, I'll find a way to handle it. Handle it." As though their baby Emma's and Lucas's child were an inconvenience. Emma felt anger erupt like hot lava in her veins. She turned away, pressing herself against the side of the house, tears mixing with sweat in the stifling Florida heat. She hadn't planned how to confront them, only to gather enough proof to force Lucas to tell the truth. But this was beyond her darkest imagination. Emma knew that if she burst into the villa, her emotions would overwhelm her, and she might not achieve what she needed. She resolved to collect evidence. Swallowing her revulsion, she recorded a short video on her phone, zoomed in through the gap, capturing Lucas's face, Sophia's face, their intimate proximity, the entire wretched tableau. Then she quietly left the property, her mind spinning with possibilities. She called Clarissa Walters, the philanthropic influencer from the cocktail gala. Clarissa picked up on the first ring, sounding worried. Emma confided everything she had seen. Clarissa listened with hushed sympathy, telling Emma that she suspected there was more to Lucas's mistress than just a casual fling. Rumor had it that Sophia came from a financially troubled but well-connected family, seeking wealthy men to ensure her lavish lifestyle. Clarissa promised to keep an ear to the ground. Over the next few days, Emma stayed at a modest inn in Florida, incognito. She secretly tracked Lucas as he and Sophia dined at exclusive restaurants, went shopping for expensive jewelry, and took moonlit strolls on the beach. Each moment was another dagger in Emma's heart, yet she forced herself to keep gathering evidence. She even considered hiring a private investigator, but her instincts told her that the video footage and eyewitness accounts would be enough. On the third day, she discovered that Lucas had rented a small yacht for a private celebration with Sophia. As Emma watched them sail off from a distance, she clutched the hotel receipts from Maui, the new receipts from Florida, and her phone with incriminating videos. She realized Lucas wasn't just dallying around, he was living a full-blown alternative life, complete with romantic gestures that once were exclusively hers. Emma's heartbreak soon turned to confusion and fear when she saw a text message appear on her phone from a blocked number. It read, "Don't be naive. Leave Florida now, or you'll regret it." Her heart dropped. It seemed someone was aware of her presence and her vigil. She wondered if Lucas or Sophia had grown suspicious. Anxiety gnawed at her. She was pregnant, alone, and thrust into a dangerous scenario. She tried to remain calm, rationalizing that perhaps it was a scare tactic to keep her away. That night, she placed a chair against the door of her inn-room, ensuring no one could enter without her knowledge. She lay awake in bed, protective instincts flaring for her unborn child. The next morning, she weighed her options. She could confront Lucas here in Florida, or wait until he returned home and face him in a more controlled environment. She also worried about her own safety now. The message threatened her, implying that if she didn't back off, there could be consequences. Determined to stand her ground, she decided she would fly back to Manhattan, gather what remained of her composure, and plan a confrontation that no one would be able to dismiss. Before leaving Florida, Emma did one last thing. She approached the villa where Lucas and Sophia were staying. In a daring move, she pretended to be an event planner, introducing herself at the reception desk, asking if the guests in Villa 14 needed additional arrangements. The unsuspecting staff mentioned that Mr. Carlyle and Miss Arrington had extended their stay for another week. Emma clenched her jaw at the confirmation. Then, with a tight smile, she left. She had all she needed. Back in Manhattan, Emma collapsed into the solitude of her penthouse. The city lights seemed cold and distant now, a stark contrast to her once fairy tale life. Feeling the baby's rhythmic kicks, she whispered promises into the still air. She vowed to protect her child from the heartbreak swirling around them. Emma considered the best way to confront Lucas. She could do it privately, just the two of them, but a part of her wanted the world to see the truth. She wanted his immaculate image tarnished in front of the same crowd that had admired their marriage as the epitome of glamour. Through Clarissa's connections, she discovered Lucas had a significant business event scheduled the following week, a private investor retreat in Lake Placid, upstate New York, where deals worth millions would be signed. It was rumored that everything Lucas had built up to this point, his entire startup, hinged on securing these final investments. Emma decided that would be the perfect time to appear, armed with her evidence. Let him face the reality of what he'd done when the stakes were highest. In the meantime, Emma made copies of all the receipts, took screenshots of her phone videos, and even placed them on a secure online drive. She wouldn't give Lucas any chance to buy his way out of this. Every piece of incriminating proof was carefully preserved. She also consulted a high-powered divorce attorney recommended by Clarissa, who assured Emma that her evidence would bolster any legal claim she might pursue. But Emma still wrestled with the question of why. Why would Lucas risk everything for this mistress? Was it mere lust, or was there more at play? She scoured financial documents for any sign that his business was in jeopardy or that Sophia had some hold over him. Bits and pieces suggested that Lucas's finances, while extensive, were more precarious than anyone believed. He had poured massive amounts into expansions, taken loans, courted new investors with bold promises. Perhaps a wealthy, connected mistress was part of his strategy to secure new funding. The thought sickened Emma, but it also lit a fire in her heart. She wouldn't let him use her or their child as pawns in his ruthless climb to power. Days passed like molasses, each one a churn of dread and anticipation for Emma. She immersed herself in tasks, organizing the penthouse, sorting baby clothes, drafting possible statements she might say to Lucas. She practiced her confrontation in front of the mirror, tears threatening to spill whenever she pictured the look on his face when she revealed she knew everything. Part of her wanted to see regret, heartbreak in his eyes. Another part wanted him to suffer as she had. When Lucas finally returned from Florida, Emma maintained a facade of normalcy. He arrived late in the evening, offering some vague explanation about a delayed flight from a California conference. He didn't bring back any souvenirs, nor did he make any mention of his extended absence. Emma noticed a faint scent on him that wasn't cologne, something floral, reminiscent of the breezes in Florida. Her heart twisted, but she said nothing. She offered a tired smile and retreated to the guest bedroom, claiming she was more comfortable sleeping alone in her current stage of pregnancy. Lucas barely batted an eye at that. He seemed relieved to avoid her presence. Emma realized then how far apart they had drifted. That once scorching passion was now a mere flicker of courtesy. She hardened her resolve. The confrontation was near. On a crisp autumn day, Lucas departed again, this time to Lake Placid for his pivotal investor retreat. Emma waited a few days, timing her arrival for the evening when she knew the investors would host a glamorous gala at the retreat lodge. She drove up herself, determined to catch him off guard. The scenic route was supposed to be breathtaking, but Emma saw only the reflection of her own tension in the mirror. When she arrived at the lodge, she was taken aback by its grandeur. Perched beside a crystal-clear lake, it boasted a sprawling compound of wooden cabins and stately meeting halls, all wrapped in the majestic embrace of the Adirondack Mountains. Staff bustled around, ensuring high-profile guests were catered to. Emma spotted name tags for wealthy executives, some faces she recognized from the Manhattan social circuit. Before making her entrance, she changed into a floor-length emerald dress that accentuated her pregnant belly while still showcasing her elegance. She carefully did her makeup, noting that despite her emotional turmoil, her reflection looked poised. This was her moment. She wasn't just Emma Carlyle, the housewife. She was a woman wronged, and she had a voice. Stepping into the main hall was like entering a different world. Soft music wafted through the air. Candles glimmered on tables adorned with exquisite floral arrangements. Genteel laughter and quiet conversations filled the space. Emma felt eyes on her immediately. A few recognized her from past events, their gazes flicking from her belly to her determined expression. She spotted Lucas near a tall window overlooking the lake, engaged in a tense conversation with a group of investors. There was an intensity about him, a desperation in his gestures, as though he was trying to convince them of something. Emma inhaled sharply, remembering how he used to be so confident. Now she saw glimpses of fear in his eyes. If he didn't seal these deals, everything might come crashing down. Determined, Emma made her way across the room. A hush fell over certain clusters of guests as she passed by. Her heart thumped violently, but she steadied herself. Finally, she reached Lucas. He turned, startled to see her. "Emma, what are you doing here?" he stammered. She noticed how he scanned the crowd, perhaps worried about how this surprise arrival might look. Or maybe he feared the secrets she carried. "Hello, Lucas," she said, her voice calm, yet laced with an undercurrent of tension. Her gaze flicked to the investors. "Mind if I borrow my husband for a quick moment?" Lucas excused himself from the group, promising to return shortly. He led Emma to a quieter corner near the buffet tables. He forced a smile, but there was panic in his eyes. "Emma, we'll talk about whatever it is after this. Right now is a critical moment for the company," he said in hushed urgency. Emma drew in a steadying breath. She reached into her clutch and pulled out one of the Maui receipts, brandishing it before Lucas. "After your business conference?" You mean like the one in Maui? She let the name drop, her eyes boring into his. Lucas's face lost a shade of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but Emma pressed forward, producing the Florida receipts and the screenshots from her phone. How long, Lucas? How long have you been deceiving me and lying to my face? She demanded, voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Lucas glanced around, trying to maintain composure. Emma, please, not here. We can sort this out in private, he whispered, fear evident in his eyes. The scornful tear in Emma's gaze revealed that she was past caring about discretion. All she could see was the man who had promised to protect her and their child, now exposed as a fraud. She wanted him to feel the shame she had felt. At that moment, the crowd parted almost theatrically, and in walked Sophia Arrington, clad in a sleek black gown that showcased her willowy figure. Emma's breath caught. She hadn't known Sophia would be here, but in retrospect, it made sense. If Lucas was using connections through Sophia or her associates, she might be present for the big pitch. Lucas's face went pale. Emma noticed how he involuntarily shifted, as though preparing to shield Sophia from the impending disaster. This only fueled Emma's anger. She addressed Sophia directly, her voice echoing across the hush that now enveloped them. So you're the woman my husband's been parading around with. I hope he told you I'm pregnant with his child. Sophia blinked, a flicker of discomfort crossing her refined features. Whether she had any shame was unclear, but her cheeks tinged pink. She glanced from Lucas to Emma. This isn't the time or place, Sophia said softly, casting a desperate look at Lucas. In that moment, Emma laughed a hollow, bitter sound. You're worried about time and place now? Did either of you spare a thought for me when you were sneaking off to Maui or Florida? Did you care about the scandal or the heartbreak? Tears glimmered at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Whispers rippled through the crowd, which had begun to circle around them. Among the onlookers were influential investors, socialites, and perhaps even some journalists who had come to cover the high-stakes retreat. Lucas's face told the story of a man whose carefully crafted world was teetering on the brink of ruin. Emma had once admired his confidence, but now she saw the hollowness behind it. Sophia placed a hand on Lucas's arm, trying to steady him. "We need to handle this discreetly," she muttered. Lucas, evidently panicked, tried to usher Emma out of the hall. "Let's talk in private, please," he pleaded. But Emma stood her ground, removing a phone from her clutch. She pressed the play button, and a video began to stream the image of Lucas and Sophia in that Florida villa, intimately chatting on the couch. The audio was faint, but the faces were unmistakable. A few gasps sounded from the watchers. Emma refused to be silenced. "I gave up everything for you, Lucas," she choked out. "I believed in your dreams, your business. I stood by you even when you became distant, and all this time you've been carrying on with her." Lucas tried to grab her wrist, but she jerked away. She looked into his eyes and saw something terrifying remorse mingled with a desperate need to contain the scandal. But there was no genuine apology yet. "Why, Lucas?" she asked, voice quivering. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, aware that every word was being dissected by the silent, wide-eyed crowd. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he managed. "I thought Sophia and her family, they promised to bring in investments. I needed to keep the company afloat, and it got complicated. I never meant to hurt you, Emma, I swear." Sophia, evidently uncomfortable under the gaze of so many, tried to salvage the moment. "Lucas, let's just tell them the truth about your finances, about how the money is gone. We can't hide it anymore. These investors deserve honesty." A ripple passed through the group of investors who were obviously concerned about the revelation. Emma felt her fury flare higher. Money, finances. This was the reason he threw away their marriage. She stared in disbelief. "You can't blame your betrayal on a business deal," she hissed. "You betrayed our vows. You destroyed our family for a shot at more money." Lucas shook his head as if confusion rattled him. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "Things spiraled. I was over my head. I never meant for this to happen." Just then, one of the primary investors in the group, a stern, grey-haired man, stepped forward. "So, let me get this straight," he began. "You courted our investment by presenting false financial statements, all while hoping your mistress could pull in even more funds behind the scenes?" His expression was a mix of disgust and fury. "We don't invest in men who lie at home. They certainly can't be trusted with our money." That statement landed with the weight of a judge's gavel. A couple of other investors murmured their agreement, stepping away from Lucas. Their expressions made it clear. They wanted nothing more to do with him. The entire business empire he'd built was disintegrating before Emma's eyes, and, ironically, she felt no pity. Sophia, seeing the collapse, hissed something into Lucas's ear. Emma didn't catch it, but the frustrated expression on Sophia's face was clear. If Lucas was no longer financially reliable, what would become of their arrangement? Emma watched as a flicker of panic passed between them. Then, in a final public denunciation, the grey-haired investor announced, "We're withdrawing our interest effective immediately. We'll be reconsidering our connections with Carlyle Innovations." Gasps and murmurs intensified while hotel staff looked on with uncertainty. Lucas swayed, as though physically struck by the words. His reputation, his credibility, his entire livelihood crumbling in real time. Karma had a way of arriving swiftly when the mask dropped. In that suspended moment, Emma realized something profound. She was free. Free from illusions, free from waiting for Lucas to return to the man she had once known. She had done her part, exposed him for the liar he was. Now she needed to salvage her own life, for her sake and for her child's. She felt a burden lift off her shoulders, replaced by an urgent sense of self-preservation and motherhood. She turned to leave, her heart pounding as though it might leap from her chest. She heard Lucas call after her, "Emma, wait!" But she ignored him. If she stayed, she feared she might crumble in tears at the heartbreak of it all. Yet she wouldn't let him see her like that. Not now, not after she had fought so hard to stand tall. Outside, the night was cool, and a gentle wind passed over the placid lake. Emma found a bench near the shore, took off her heels, and let her swollen feet rest on the grass. She breathed in the crisp air, tears finally streaming down her face. She felt a swirl of emotions, relief, sadness, anger. The confrontation was over, but her life was now forever changed. Clarissa Walters, who had driven up earlier out of concern, found Emma near the lake. Clarissa wrapped a warm shawl over Emma's shoulders. "You're strong," she whispered. "You did what you had to do. No one here will doubt what really happened." Emma nodded, touched by her friend's unwavering support. For a brief moment, she worried about finances. Lucas had controlled most of their assets. But she remembered her attorney's words. The courts would likely side with her, especially given the evidence of infidelity. She also had her father's small inheritance, tucked away a nest egg that might sustain her while she restructured her life. Most importantly, she had her baby, a new life to cherish and protect. 2 weeks after the scandal in Lake Placid, Emma's life took another dramatic turn. She was finalizing the divorce papers in her attorney's office when she felt a sharp, insistent cramp in her abdomen. She looked at her attorney with wide eyes. Another contraction hit, and panic seized her. She hadn't expected labor this soon. She was barely at 38 weeks, but the baby decided it was time. Clarissa drove Emma to the hospital, where nurses quickly ushered her into a birthing suite. The hours that followed were both exhilarating and excruciating. As she labored, images of Lucas's betrayal flickered in her mind. Yet a stronger emotion took hold, an overwhelming desire to meet her child, to hold them, to promise them a life filled with genuine love and honesty. Lucas got word, presumably from a call Emma's attorney placed, and he arrived at the hospital. But Emma refused to see him. She was amidst the final agonizing push when her child, a beautiful baby boy, let out his first cry. Sobs of joy racked Emma's body. In that moment, she forgot all about Lucas, about Sophia, about the entire heartbreak. All that mattered was the new life in her arms. Several hours later, as Emma rested, a nurse gently knocked and announced that Lucas was outside, begging to see his son. Emma's heart twisted. She didn't want a scene, but she also recognized that he was the child's father. Summoning what remained of her resolve, she told the nurse to let Lucas in, albeit briefly. Lucas entered tentatively, his eyes puffy, face drawn. He looked haggard, like a man who had lost everything. Quietly, he approached Emma's bedside, glancing at the sleeping infant in her arms. He whispered, "May I hold him?" Emma hesitated, her protective instincts roaring, but something inside her loosened. She gently passed the newborn over, watching as Lucas cradled him in trembling arms. Tears streaked Lucas's face. "He's perfect," he murmured. Emma closed her eyes, recalling the sweet moments of their marriage before everything went wrong. She told him in a soft but firm tone, "I don't want you to think this changes anything between us. Our son deserves a father, but he also deserves to be protected from lies and betrayal. I'm willing to set up a custody arrangement, but I need you to understand that I'm moving on." Lucas nodded, tears still escaping. In that moment, Emma saw a glimpse of genuine remorse, perhaps even heartbreak. But it was too late for them. Karma had done its part. The damage was irreversible. She would let him be part of their son's life, but as for their marriage, it lay in ruins, replaced by a new beginning for her and the child. Rumors swirled in Manhattan's high society about Sophia Arrington's abrupt downfall. The wealthy family she claimed to have connections with withdrew their support when news broke of the scandal at Lake Placid. It turned out that Sophia had been using Lucas for more than just romance. She'd hoped to leverage his rising star in the tech world to regain her own family's favor. But once the scandal became public, no one wanted the Arrington name tied to such a messy affair. Sophia soon lost invitations to prestigious events. Her social media presence dwindled to near nothing. Word was that her trust fund had been cut off, leaving her to scramble for financial stability. She attempted to contact Lucas, but he was too mired in his own ruin. Bankruptcy threatened his business, the investor deals having slipped away. Emma heard from Clarissa that Sophia was last seen drifting through lesser-known clubs, seeking new benefactors. Hard karma had indeed come for Sophia as well. Lucas attempted to salvage his company, but the public revelation of his misleading financials meant a rapid and disastrous loss of investor confidence. Share prices plummeted, partners withdrew, lawsuits loomed. In a desperate move, Lucas sold the penthouse to cover some of his debts. He even reached out to Emma for help, claiming that if he went bankrupt, he wouldn't be able to support their son. But Emma was no longer naive. She directed all communications through her attorney, who ensured child support would be arranged under strict legal conditions. Emma felt a pang of pity sometimes, recalling how unstoppable Lucas once seemed, but pity was overshadowed by the memory of betrayal. She refused to let him manipulate her again. Emma moved into a cozy, sun-drenched apartment overlooking a small park in Brooklyn. It wasn't the lavish penthouse, but she found comfort in its simplicity. She began painting again, a hobby she'd once abandoned in the whirlwind of her marriage. She placed her baby boy's crib near the largest window so he could nap under soft streams of sunlight. Every day she marveled at how her child's peaceful presence made her feel alive, hopeful. She also started taking online courses in interior design, an old passion she had set aside when she married Lucas. Clarissa helped connect her to a few small freelance jobs designing nursery spaces for mothers in their circle. Little by little, Emma built a portfolio, gathering testimonials, forging an independent path. With each new project, she regained confidence in her abilities and her worth. One morning, Emma received a surprise call from the grey-haired investor who had publicly denounced Lucas at Lake Placid, Jonathan Price. In a gentle tone, he apologized for the drama that had unfolded. He expressed sympathy for Emma's situation, admitting that while business was business, he regretted how personally destructive it had all become for her. He also commended her courage in exposing the truth. Then he offered an olive branch. "I have a friend who's looking for an interior design consultant for a boutique hotel. He's opening in upstate New York. I've seen pictures of your personal spaces online. Clarissa forwarded me. If you're interested, it could be a valuable partnership." Emma felt tears of gratitude. She agreed to meet. Despite the heartbreak and shame she'd suffered, she realized not everyone in those wealthy circles lacked empathy. Jonathan Price saw potential and integrity in her, separate from Lucas's sins. Emma took that as a sign, a chance at a fresh start. Before finalizing the custody arrangements, Emma agreed to a mediation session with Lucas. She hadn't seen him since the hospital. He arrived looking thinner, less composed, the spark in his eyes all but extinguished. They discussed logistics, how often he would see the baby, how financial support would be structured, how medical expenses would be shared. Emma stood her ground firmly. She had learned to protect herself and her son. Lucas tried to apologize. "I was stupid and greedy. I lost sight of what mattered," he said, voice shaking. Emma met his gaze. "I don't hate you," she finally answered, "but I don't trust you, and I can't forgive you yet. My priority is ensuring our son grows up loved and secure." He nodded, tears gathering at the corner of his eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes to make it up to him," he whispered. Only time would tell if that was true. For Emma, the conversation gave her a sense of finality. She realized she was no longer dependent on Lucas emotionally or financially. She was stronger now than she had ever been. Despite the swirling rumors, Emma managed to maintain her dignity. Clarissa helped her navigate any unwanted press inquiries, painting Emma as the wronged but resilient mother. Journalists who tried to sensationalize the story quickly found that Emma refused to air dirty laundry for profit. She simply stated the facts when necessary and focused on her new design projects. Meanwhile, Lucas sank further into obscurity. The lawsuits drained his resources. He ended up selling nearly everything, including his prized sports cars and private membership club passes. Emma heard from acquaintances that he was living in a modest apartment, working under a former competitor to pay his bills. It was a far cry from the millionaire lifestyle he once flaunted. Months later, Emma received an unexpected letter hand-delivered. It was from Sophia Arrington. Emma's gut reaction was anger, but curiosity made her open it. Sophia apologized for her role in the affair, claiming she had been misled by Lucas's promises of a stable future. She insisted she'd had no idea Emma was pregnant until much later. The letter read as though Sophia wanted absolution, explaining that her own life had become a nightmare since the scandal. She pleaded for forgiveness, or at least understanding. Emma read the words, feeling a swirl of emotions. She wondered if Sophia's apologies were genuine or just another ploy. Either way, Emma decided not to respond. She could find her own peace without engaging. The best revenge, after all, was living well. Over time, Emma's design business flourished. She put her heart into each project, inspired by the knowledge that she could craft environments of serenity and warmth, something she had desperately craved during her tumultuous marriage. Her son, whom she named Oliver, grew healthy and joyful. His laughter filled the apartment, infusing life into every corner. Emma's circle of supportive friends expanded as well. She began attending events again, not as Lucas Carlyle's wife, but as Emma Carlyle, the up-and-coming interior designer with an empathetic touch. She signed a lease for a small studio, employing 2 assistants. Each day she arrived at the studio with Oliver in tow, determined to build a future free from betrayal and deceit. In a twist of fate, Emma was contacted for a potential project in Florida, specifically near the same luxury villas in Clearwater Shores. A prominent family wanted to revamp their oceanfront property. Emma hesitated at first. Memories of heartbreak still raw, but she realized this was another step toward reclaiming her power. She accepted the job. When she returned to Florida, she felt an unexpected sense of calm. The sunshine and gentle ocean breeze reminded her of the day she'd discovered Lucas's affair. But now she stood on her own 2 feet, proud, strong, a respected professional. One afternoon, curiosity led her to drive by the villa where Lucas and Sophia once flaunted their romance. The place looked the same: pristine lawns, gleaming architecture. Emma felt no pang of sadness or rage, only a sense of triumph. Life had gone on, and she had won back her self-worth. Time, as it often does, healed many wounds. When Oliver was nearly a year old, Emma found herself unexpectedly drawn to a fellow designer named Matteo, whom she met at a trade show. He was gentle, creative, and respectful of her boundaries. She was hesitant at first, afraid of repeating history, but Matteo's kindness and steady support gradually thawed the walls around her heart. They began collaborating on projects, and he bonded sweetly with little Oliver, never trying to replace his father, but always there for him. For Emma, it felt surreal to experience a form of love not tainted by deception. She told Matteo about her past, and instead of recoiling, he admired her strength. A quiet, cautious romance blossomed. For the first time in years, Emma believed in the possibility of a happy ending on her own terms. News eventually trickled back to Emma that Lucas was making an attempt at redemption. He'd secured a small venture capital loan to start a modest software consultancy. He was apparently living responsibly, no flashy expenses, and was consistent with child support payments. He visited Oliver under the arranged schedule, always making sure not to cross Emma's personal boundaries. In a strange way, Emma realized that as painful as it was, the downfall forced Lucas to confront his demons. If his earlier life was built on illusions, perhaps now he had a chance to build something real. As for Sophia, rumors placed her in Europe, hopping from city to city. Some said she was attempting to marry into another wealthy family. Others claimed she was struggling with mounting debts. Regardless, Emma no longer paid attention to Sophia's fate. Hard karma had already done its work. Emma focused on her own life, her child, her art, her burgeoning career, and the gentle love growing between her and Matteo. One sunny afternoon, Emma found a moment of peace on her apartment balcony, sipping tea while Oliver napped. She let her mind wander back through the chaos of the past year, the discovery of Lucas's affair, the dramatic confrontation at Lake Placid, the avalanche of consequences that followed. She thought about the receipts from the Four Seasons Resort Maui, now tucked away in a box labeled Old Life. She remembered the hush that fell over the crowd when she exposed Lucas, how her entire world had seemed to tilt. Yet from that upheaval, she emerged stronger, more self-aware. She discovered a talent and passion for design that now sustained her. She found support in genuine friendships, especially Clarissa, who had proven that not all wealthy socialites were shallow. Most importantly, she embraced motherhood with an intensity she never anticipated. Oliver gave her days a sense of wonder, and nights a sense of purpose. Yes, the betrayal stung, but it no longer defined her. She had turned the page, forging a path forward that was hers alone. Emma allowed a small smile to form, feeling the gentle breeze graze her cheeks. This is my life now, she thought, and it's beautiful in its own imperfect way. Thank you for joining me on this whirlwind journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption. Emma's fierce determination to uncover the truth led her into the darkest corners of her marriage, but also guided her to a future brighter than she ever imagined. From a shocking confrontation at a glamorous investor retreat to finding her own strength as a single mother, Emma's story proves that loyalty to oneself can conquer the pain of betrayal. And in the end, hard karma has a way of rebalancing the scales. If you found this tale riveting, inspiring, or simply entertaining, make sure to hit that like button and share it with your friends. Help spread the drama and the lessons within. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any more incredible stories of resilience, love, and the twists of fate. Your support means the world to us.